If any of you were kind of worried or unsure where Chainsawman would go, what the future would look like, what things would we focus on, this chapter provides context. It provides clarity and it provides a lot of problems. A lot of ideas that just don't seem vetted. They don't seem like good ideas. They seem very problematic, but also experimental. Not to mention, because of all of this information, there's a ton of lingering questions that I have that I would love answers for eventually. Stuff in relation to Kishibe and Yoshida, their allegiance to public safety, to this goal that they're trying to work towards, but also the comparison to Makima's plans, her goals and her wants. We've always perceived her as being ultimately evil and wrong, but maybe it's not the full picture. There is a conversation to be had about her intentions, morally or ethically, is kind of thrown out the window when it comes to devils, but for her, what she was doing in comparison to what public safety are trying to do now is kind of night and day. It's on the same page, but their approach to it very different. Let me explain. Firstly, context, and very important. With Ia being erased, certain things did and didn't happen. You would think that because the concept of Ia was gone from human existence, that the world would not be able to hear anything, right? Things like cell phones and radios would cease to exist or even be recognized as being used because you listen to those things. Not actually true. It turns out in the near 4 minutes that Ia was erased from existence, humans adapted. Humans could still hear and cell phones and radios still existed. However, viewing the word that was Ia was non-existent. When you looked at it, it had no previous connection whatsoever. It was just a word that no one knew what it was associated with. However, they also don't remember having the conversation about Ia. So when it was brought back into existence, those conversations were forgotten. That is very interesting. It's not life or death. It's not critical to understand, but it does give you a better perspective on how potentially things are erased from existence and how it manipulates humans. What doesn't really make sense, however, is the world without ears still being able to hear and having devices and things that equate to having ears. So what actually happened? It would seem to me, and what public safety are trying to push forward in this chapter, is that humanity evolves very rapidly. The need for ears or hearing is diverted elsewhere. It's not explained how, and that's why they explain it to be messy, but somehow humans have evolved. Hearing is still a thing. All of those things associated with ears is now gone somewhere else and still being utilized. Now, because of that experiment, public safety are pushing forward something bigger. Remember the previous devil we just got introduced to? Mutilation, mirror, primal fear. Turns out it's actually the aging devil, and it is a primal fear, so 50% correct. The aging devil, however, has been in communication with public safety. Don't ask me how they do that. Trying to summon a primal fear into Earth is incredibly difficult, so having a coherent conversation with one trying to reach an agreement just sounds absurd. If you want to deep it further, I would assume that potentially devils that they have on their team or someone like Fami could easily get in contact with one with an offering, just to throw that idea out there. I do like the portrayal of aging in here though. This is the first time we're seeing a primal fear kind of work independently from darkness, for example. Aging is quite literally communicating with public safety to do something. Public safety want aging to get erased. They want to take aging from human beings altogether. In exchange, aging wants 10,000 children between a specific age bracket to be killed off in front of mirrors. Arguably, that is still incredibly transactional, but a lot more fleshed out than we've ever seen before. Firstly, primal fears live in a state of their own dimension. They don't really have much of a personality from what we've seen. They're kind of just beings that exist. The fact that there's negotiating and understanding and that aging is perfectly fine to be erased as long as those requirements are met is funny to me. They really don't care. What does that do for aging? I don't really know. At first I thought maybe it's like personal satisfaction, maybe it's something that powers them up and makes them feel energized, but at the same time I also think it might be a spawning method. From our very small and limited understanding of primal fears, they can't just easily throw themselves into the human world. They live in their own pocket dimension that we know of that is separate from hell, and for them to jump into the human world there has to be a very big exchange. A bunch of death, rituals, contracts, you name it. Something has has to be done on large quantity or value to spawn that person in. Sometimes you can only partially spawn them in, which we've seen before, but getting thrown into that other dimension, very different. Use fall as an example. A lot of people had to get killed in the essence of falling so she could spawn out of the human remains. Maybe this is the same thing for aging and the total requirement. Who knows? And let's not to forget Fall either with the whole chef cooking motif. She was intrinsically controlled by Fami, so it was a little bit odd. I would love to see Fall in like the natural habitat of what she operates. Is she always a chef? Is she always cooking up things? I don't know. So with this, we have a bit of a conundrum. Public safety, specifically Fumiko, is doing the negotiations to all of these bigwigs, these old heads that run Japan. None of these people have anything to do with devils or public safety. They're just government officials that are very powerful. So she's trying to convince them that aging can get erased from existence, and using the example of Ea and how humanity responded to Ea being erased, aging should technically work. It's not the most sound of arguments to make. While it works perfectly in negotiation, it's just such a massive leap. You're going from erasing Ea and how humans adapted to that to something as massive as aging itself, a core fundamental part of human nature. How would humans respond to not aging? Would they become immortal? Would they continue to technically age and just live forever? Or do they stop aging entirely? When you get rid of the concept of aging, do people just stop? Specific things within your body technically wouldn't age either. So how exactly do you plan to push humanity forward? How do you plan to evolve human nature when you can't even give birth to children? How are your children meant to age? Does that make sense? Do you see how fundamentally flawed a lot of this ideology is? These are big things that should be talked about a lot more. To me, this sounds unironically more devil orientated. I don't think devils age. I don't see the need for them to age. And yet they're constantly born and produced by a different civilization, a different entity to make them possible. In what way would humans evolve so they could continue to have children that don't technically age? And that's just one of many things that they probably want to get rid of. Now, before we evaluate that as being concrete, this could actually be a test. One, to see if chainsawman can actually erase something as powerful as a primal fear. Two, to see the effects of what aging has for a certain amount of time. Three, depending on those effects, if it's possible or should be possible to do other big things. I can understand problematic, disgusting, horrible things that plague humanity. Stuff that, funny enough, Makima was trying to get rid of. But in her list, she mentions Fami, she mentions war, and she mentions death. And death is kind of the biggest thing here. And I've talked about it multiple different times in that erasing death probably shouldn't be a thing. Not only because chainsawman has erased other versions of death before, but there might not be anything else. If death ceases to exist, similar to aging, human nature might cease to exist in itself. You implode human evolution in on itself and just become nothing. You cease to exist. It's a pretty weird conversation to have because it's all hypothetical, it's all theoretical, it's all mixing of different ideas and understandings that just have no clear answers. Here comes a twist. Fumiko gets the go-ahead, and before she can pass that off to everyone to initiate the operation, her mouth gets erased. And a couple of other things as well. Octopus, snow, and bitterness. Firstly, octopus. Yoshida? Hello? What happened? Like, we knew he was here. We knew he was gonna fight. Did he get bodied that easily? Is devils just gone? Snow and bitterness are kind of an odd choice as well because I think they reflect previous things in part 1, like the snow fight between Denji and Aki. But mouth is interesting. See, it makes me question how much control public safety have, but mouth is kind of the most problematic thing because even chainsawman himself doesn't have a mouth. So how do you expect him to eat stuff, let alone throw it back up? Are you going to carve him in half? Are you going to play with his umbilical cord? Are we going to go into the birth motif once again? And if you don't know about the whole birth motif, I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know what public safety are trying to achieve. Did they let him erase mouth, or is this something that just happened accidentally? Because very silly, but if there's a plan, then they must be trying to see if they can indirectly get him to throw things back up. I guess it doesn't count if they explode him on the spot using like a primal fear or something. It does come into question starvation, Fami's plan being able to starve Denji and potentially stop him from eating and throwing stuff up, etc., try to control him, but also war and Asa. We don't really know what they're going to do, how they're going to apply themselves to this situation, but I think they would be heavy hitters. Obviously not working for public safety, but indirectly aiding them. There is a ton more theory crafting type conversations here, and I might talk about them all very soon.